Hello, welcome back to Dr. Introspect TV, and it's your host, Dr. Introspect, and I'm back. Today I am coming at you another podcast style analysis, and we are going to be talking about sex education. Stay tuned. And we're back. The show we're going to be talking about is set in Britain, and it is a Netflix original series, and we are in the second installment, so season two. The setting is high school, teenagers, and how they are going about exploring their sexuality. Now, given the topic, I expect a lot of sensitivity around it. People currently feel like teenagers are being overly sexualized in entertainment today, and that is understandable. And I think it creates quite a confusing conundrum because in real life, some of these things you're seeing on the screen would be illegal, but because it's fiction, somehow it's okay. What makes it even more confusing is that in some of these stories, you have adults playing the roles of teenagers. And so people fall into a kind of dilemma about how to approach it. But I'm not going to be dwelling so much about those aspects and criticisms for these kind of shows, but I'm going to be touching more on the aspects of it that can form universal principles that we can apply to our lives and take the message away from. This is going to be more of a reflection rather than an analysis. And if you have watched any of my TV series analysis, you know I can go as far as covering up to 10 seasons of a show just to explore and analyze all the depths that we can find in the stories. But today I am going to be looking at just a season two of this show. And if you want me to do a thorough analysis, do make a request for that in the comment section below. I'm going to be talking about some of the aspects of the show that I thought were impressive, and hopefully I can be brief. The first thing I want to touch on is the aspect of communication. With regards to communication, I notice aspects such as vulnerability, and I thought it was incredibly impressive. It was something I saw repeated all over the entire series, particularly the season two. There were a lot of tough conversations to be had between children, between parents, between friends. And I'd have to say that I was utterly impressed by it. I feel like in our age in society, communication is extremely important, and a huge aspect about that is vulnerability because then the other person can really understand where you're coming from and be better able to empathize and connect to the message you are passing across. When people are honest about their feelings and honest about their needs, then they're more likely to have opportunities for those needs to be met. For example, there's a girl in the show that is really obsessed about aliens and UFOs and all of that kind of thing. And that's how she also likes to explore sexuality. But her partner had been kind of going along with it, but never expressing how she really felt. How sometimes she didn't want to cosplay in that kind of way to achieve intimacy, but sometimes she just wanted something more normal, something more simple. Being able to speak up Being able to speak up and say what you feel and what you need requires a lot of bravery. That is a level of vulnerability that I was ultimately impressed by. I couldn't tell if it was just the storytelling or if these teens are really just that emotionally intelligent. I think that the show is highly underrated in terms of the level of emotional intelligence displayed here by the cast members. Being honest about what you need is also something we see with Dr. Jean Milburn when she goes to therapy with the father of her child, or the guy that she thinks is the father of her child. Being able to just speak and advocate for yourself is really something that is underrated. And I think in today's society, it is clearly needed. I like how the mental health aspects of the show is really not just glossed over because it is really important, especially in today's age with people struggling. We need to be more open about addressing mental health struggles. Another aspect of the show that I thought was really interesting was the aspect of self respect. That was a theme that really shone so bright to me, and I thought it would be beneficial to touch on that. When one of the main characters of the show was breaking up with someone, and the person I'm talking about is Maeve. When Maeve was dating this other guy, there was a guy on a wheelchair, I forget his name, that Maeve was seeing briefly. And when he felt like he was second place, he told her that he doesn't deserve to be anyone's second best. And I thought that that was such a powerful message. I thought that that was such a powerful message because in a lot of relationships, a lot of people settle. A lot of people feel like second best is enough. And when he spoke up for himself in that kind of way, it's not necessarily saying that he doesn't love her anymore. He's just saying that he deserves more. He doesn't see Maeve as a second choice. Maeve is the choice, and he deserves to be with someone that sees him that way. And I thought that was admirable. I thought that we don't have enough of that in today's world. We have a lot of people that compromise on their standards and sell themselves short because sometimes they don't love themselves. They feel that they deserve less, but they don't. I liked how they touched on the problem with the porn industry and how things are made into fantasies, and nothing wrong with that, but a lot of the people consuming this content are often people that are impressionable, like teenagers and even adults. And even though in certain relationships people can enjoy that kind of content together and it wouldn't create any kind of tension in their relationships, there's so many other relationships where such cannot be achieved because one partner or the other, or even both, do not understand the essence of fantasy and how these things are not real, and how you don't need to measure or compare your body parts to what you're seeing because this is their profession, this is what they do, and they're creating a kind of projection of an image, fantasy world that isn't necessarily real. And you can watch that if you're into that and enjoy it and not let it affect the reality of the experience that you have with real, actual human beings that are your partners. So I thought that it was good that they took their approach in explaining to people. And when people talk about adult rated content, often they talk about how women feel about it, how women are objectified, how the content is created for the male gaze, how women feel inadequate when they compare themselves to these characters. However, I would argue that men feel just as inadequate as well. And they think they should have six packs and be extremely hung. And in reality, the average size is not close to what is projected on the screen. So it's really important to have that level of honesty and realism when you decide to look at that kind of thing. And for some, it's better not to. If you cannot create that separation, and if it creates an avenue for you to feel less of yourself. Finally, I feel like emotional maturity is underrated, and I've probably touched on this when I talked about communication. And I have to say, if I could wrap this season up into one package, or if I could just sum it up into one word, the word would be communication, because that is essentially what you get here. You see how you can effectively share your feelings about something vulnerably, of course, with someone you trust, a good friend, a family member you trust, how you can listen, how you can resolve issues, take a step back, come back again, and talk about it. And with anyone watching this show, or if you decide to watch it, can separate the idea that this show is just all about sex, you would find that there are much deeper meanings in there, much deeper applications that you can apply to your life. Finally, of course, I have to touch on the subject, sex education. I think that this is a show that even adults can benefit from. I think that the topic of sex is natural and it's inescapable. It is part of life, it's how we populate the world, and it's how we keep life going. It is nature. So I don't understand why it continues to be taboo, especially among adults. So I think that there needs to be a lot of demystification about the subject, and I appreciate that shows like that create that window and avenue for us to have these conversations, because they are important. And so I will urge people that have intimate partners to really reflect upon their experiences and see how they can be able to openly talk about their needs and the experiences with their partners without fear of judgment or shame. I think that if people could be more honest, then they would be able to be more likely to have their needs met, and a lot of dissatisfaction in relationships could be prevented or even resolved. I have to say that this show is very political. It's very clear. The message abstinence versus information versus, it seems like it's abstinence or it's the other way left. And they're essentially making an argument about two different extremes. Without dwelling so much on the political side, I have to say that there are different arguments for either, although they were presented in such extreme ways. That is, when teaching abstinence, they went so far that they are shaming women for having sexual feelings. They are making sex seem so scary and so ugly, and it's going to be the end of your life. It's the worst thing ever. And of course, the approaches they are taking with the preaching of abstinence is completely different for both boys and girls. And then when they're talking about the empowerment aspect, which is what the show is kind of based on, then you see teenagers just going at it. It's almost like they are not even studying or doing anything else. They're just going at it every day, every minute, all the time. And those are very too far extremes. I feel in reality, we're probably somewhere in the middle. And there's no reason why you couldn't preach both. There's no reason why you couldn't give someone the factual information about the responsibility that it means to be able to participate in such an encounter, the preventative measures for things like STDs and unprepared pregnancies and the impacts that that can have in your life, as well as what it means to abstain and the different kinds of experiences people can have either way. People that decide to, for example, be demisexuals that don't want to engage in casual sex, that prefer for the encounters to be more meaningful and have far-reaching depths that than any other kind of experience. I do believe that empowering people with information that also enables them to understand the impacts of their choices and consequences, as well as the value of the experience, is far more than denying or shaming them for something that is completely natural. And people's bid to prevent women from having unprepared pregnancies or having teen son parents and things like that, they scar people for life. There are people that are far into adulthood that cannot have orgasms or enjoy intimacy because of the fears that have been drained into their mind about the problems with being a sexual human being. And now, depending on their faith or their moral philosophy, whatever it is that shaped their worldview, and now they're in a space where they feel like they can do this. Maybe they're now married and by their faith it's not okay for them to do it. Or maybe they feel they should only do it because it's just for procreation. But even when it is during procreation, they can't enjoy themselves. Maybe they are finally with someone they think they love, or whatever the circumstances. There is a lot of shame attached to the experience that they cannot enjoy it and they are scarred by it. And for some people, it's a complete avoidance. We are sexual human beings. We have sexual body parts. They are not just for that purpose, they can be for other purposes as well, but they are there. Denying that aspect of ourselves can be problematic, and you can read up on Sigmund Freud and other works of psychology to understand how that can feed into the shadow side. And so, with that, I come to the end of this reflection. I do recommend that you see the show if you're into that kind of thing and walk away with the lessons you can. Separate your mind from any kinds of prejudgments, and then you can walk away with a message. I hope to see you next time. Remember, I love you. Love yourselves too. Bye.